I'm Don Frazier. This is Paul Fabrizio. We're going through the Constitution line by line. We're now at the 14th Amendment, but we're in the final segment that we've broken it into, kind of somewhat artificially, but we had to break it into bite-sized chunks. And this final segment has to do with
debt, public debt.
Public debt.
Okay, and what we've gone through so far is basically the radical Republicans beating down on the Southerners.
Yes.
Okay, so last part. The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrections or rebellions, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. And then the amendment concludes with the last section on enforcement. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. This is a real beatdown of the South.
Northern debts are valid.
Southern debts
are not. Now, what's interesting is it says you are not going to be compensated for the loss of slaves. So it's been estimated that amounted to, in present dollars, $21 trillion.
That's the U.S. debt.
That's the U.S. debt
today.
That is essentially just eliminated off of Southern books.
Right. Now we're talking about the value, I hate to use that word, of the slaves.
Yeah.
Plus, are we talking about other losses that
they would incur? No, we're just talking about the estimated value of the slaves, given an average number, is $21 trillion in today's dollars. So you got to understand that Southerners carried slaves on their books as capital items.
Right.
Like you'd carry a tractor.
Right.
Or a pickup. All right, so it's a balance sheet issue. And from their balance sheet, collectively, $21 trillion just evaporates.
Just disappears.
Which is amazing, because we're talking about reparations now.
Right.
And it's a big political issue, and it surfaces from time to time. I think Jesse Jackson brought it up the first time. And we're talking about reparations for the loss of wages and loss of income, etc., to slaves and their labor. It's been estimated that slaves probably consumed 66% of everything they produced, just with their own care, feeding, housing, things like that. That is not an out-around number with typical labor stuff, so if you're going to write this is blatantly racist in the comments, feel free, but you'll be incorrect. All right. The thing that no one's looked at is this $21 trillion number, because there was a lot of loss going on and spread around all over the South. And this part of the amendment says, too bad.
Yeah, there's no compensation. And I would guess that the thinking there is that we're talking about people, and
correct.
Therefore, people can't have this assigned property value.
Correct. Exactly right.
And so therefore, even the idea of there being a debt or demanding compensation
dehumanizes people who you just turned into voters.
Right. So therefore, the whole idea of what the South is asking for is just way out of line. We're not going to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the words don't even match anymore.
Right. Right.
And now you do have claims against the federal government by citizens in the South.
Right.
Because, sometimes the Federals would come by and, take your livestock.
What'd they do to Atlanta?
Or burn your barns.
Or your city.
Or your city, or, whatever. And you could make these claims to a federal commission, and they would either give you the thumbs up or thumbs down or partial payment or, just let it go into committee and never come out. Mm-hmm. And so this is going to be an ongoing process. Notice that there's no pensions for Confederates.
Right.
But there are going to be pensions for Union veterans. And that's all valid. But all you Rebs,
You just lose out.
Yeah, y'all just lost. And you got to understand what losing means. And this is part of it. Now, some of the states come back and reestablish Confederate pensions.
I was going to ask if they did.
They did. And, for instance, several states have old soldiers' homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so Austin, Texas had an old Confederate soldiers' home. We actually have some chairs from that home here on campus. Oddly enough. Chairs that once cradled the fannies of former Confederates. But there's a part of the Texas State Cemetery that's essentially a potter's field, a pauper's cemetery, where the guys that died, broke and alone in this Confederate old soldiers' home were buried, which is kind of an interesting story in itself. But Texas is not unique. I mean, this happened elsewhere in the South too. So it was left to the states to try to figure out how to honor the people that participated in their stand against the overreach of the federal government, but also the people that participated in the attempt to keep 4 million people enslaved as a state prerogative. So that's where a bunch of the Confederate monuments came from that we're now talking about tearing down and are becoming such lightning rods in present-day society. Is a bunch of these Southern organizations didn't have a tomb, because remember, Southern soldiers are just dumped in common graves. Northern soldiers are dug up and consolidated into national cemeteries. So they didn't have a tomb. They had no way to memorialize the loved and lost, and so a bunch of these monuments went up. Did some of them go up to protest?
Oh, of course.
The new racial order? Absolutely. So it's...
And sometimes they say so in there.
And sometimes they say so. I mean, anytime you see the word Anglo-Saxon on the base of a statue, it's probably a sign. But not all of them were that way. And so it's a very mixed bag. It's a very nuanced topic. But, man, we've got very little patience for nuance.
Right. Especially in the political sphere.
Especially in the political sphere.
But you look at the 14th Amendment as we come to the end of it, and there's nothing nuanced about the 14th Amendment.
No, it's a cudgel.
They're just hammered and hammered and hammered on the South. You will do what we tell you to do.
That's right.
And there's no way around it. And if you try to wiggle out of it, we're going to deny you representation. Yeah. And you don't get anything for the debt that you incurred. Sorry,
That's
you
right.
were on the losing side.
That's exactly right. And your economy is going to be devastated for generations.
Right.
I mean, before the Civil War, some of the most valuable acres on earth were in South Louisiana. And then after the Civil War, you couldn't even keep them up.
Yeah.
Well, people ask me, well, where are all these old plantation homes? What became of them? Because Northern observers, federal troops going up the Mississippi said it was mansion after mansion after mansion after mansion on the banks of the Mississippi. It's not the way it is anymore.
Right.
Well, part of the problem is you just couldn't keep them up. And so they fell to rack and ruin and finally decayed over time or caught fire, and nobody was there to put them out.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. You can go into the 1930s WPA projects where they're hiring photographers to go capture American architecture. And a lot of times you can see these old mansions in the Deep South as they're in their last phase of decay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of gives you a timeline.
70 years after.
Yeah, 70 years, they finally all fall down into sawdust and something else emerges.
Yeah. Reading the 14th Amendment is you see a spirit there that is so different than Abraham Lincoln's with malice towards none.
Absolutely. It's malice towards y'all.
Yeah, exactly. And malice is the right word.
Yeah.
Real hatred, real lack of trust. We're going to punish you. And here's how we're going to do it.
That your decisions have consequences.
Yeah. Okay, and there's still one more civil rights amendment to take up.
One more.
The 15th.
Next time.